3 victims were dead: Ronald Mercer, Martin Reeve, Michael Harper. 3 men who appeared to have nothing in common until investigators began examining how they lived rather than who they were. Each maintained predictable routines. Each documented significant portions of their lives online. Each unknowingly provided a roadmap that allowed a patient observer to understand where they would be, when they would be there, and how vulnerable they might become. As Detective Shiela Geathers dug deeper into the investigation, the case became increasingly disturbing. The murders appeared planned long before they occurred. The victims seemed selected rather than targeted. The crime scene suggested discipline rather than emotion. Most frightening of all, the killer remained invisible. By now, investigators had developed 2 significant suspects: Garrett Sloan, whose history of online harassment and monitoring behavior made him impossible to ignore; Terrence Walker, a freelance journalist whose work routinely placed him near public events, community gatherings, and online spaces frequented by the victims. Neither man could be eliminated. Neither man could be charged. Then a nurse called detectives with information that would change the direction of the investigation once again. Tonight, Detective Geathers will explain how forensic evidence began drawing investigators closer to the truth, how a 3rd suspect emerged, and why the case became more complicated just as detectives believed they were making progress. Detective, tell the audience what happened after the nurse contacted investigators.
The nurse didn't begin with a crime. She began with a memory. Several days before Michael Harper's death, a man had visited an urgent care center seeking treatment for a thumb injury. The injury itself wasn't extraordinary. People cut themselves every day. What caught her attention was the explanation. The man said he had injured himself while repairing a bow. At the time, the statement meant nothing. Then she watched news coverage discussing the murders, the victims, the distances involved, the precision involved. Something about the memory refused to leave her. Eventually, she called detectives. The information she provided was limited: a name, a time, a description of the encounter. But in investigations like this, small details often become important. The name she provided was Eric Friend. At first glance, Eric appeared unremarkable. He lived alone, maintained a relatively quiet lifestyle, had few close relationships, worked consistently, generated very little attention. Then investigators began examining his background. Eric possessed extensive experience with archery, competitive experience, professional-level training, years of practice requiring patience, concentration, and precision. Immediately, detectives became interested. Not because we believed we had identified the killer, because for the first time, we had encountered someone whose background appeared consistent with the level of planning demonstrated by the offender. The discovery elevated Eric into the investigation immediately. At approximately the same time, forensic evidence continued accumulating. Ballistics experts completed additional comparative analysis involving all 3 murder scenes. While they remained cautious regarding definitive conclusions, the findings increasingly suggested consistency across the crimes. The offender appeared to favor the same general methods, the same planning principles, and the same operational discipline. The medical examiner's office reached similar conclusions. Each victim appeared surprised. Each victim appeared selected. Each victim appeared attacked, during circumstances specifically engineered to reduce opportunities for resistance. The murders were not spontaneous. They were prepared. That finding remained one of the most important conclusions in the entire case, because preparation requires time, and time creates opportunities for mistakes. We simply hadn't found the mistake yet. Meanwhile, investigators continued examining Garrett Sloan. Garrett remained problematic. Digital forensic specialists discovered additional interactions between Garrett and 2 of the victims. His online behavior continued raising concerns. His history continued raising concerns. Everything about him suggested somebody capable of unhealthy fixation. Yet something remained missing. Every time investigators compared Garrett's personality to the offender's behavior, inconsistencies appeared. Garrett was emotional. The killer appeared detached. Garrett reacted. The killer planned. Garrett wanted attention. The killer avoided it. Still, we could not eliminate him. The evidence simply wasn't sufficient. That meant Garrett remained a suspect. Terrence Walker remained equally difficult to dismiss. As investigators examined his assignments and travel patterns, additional overlaps emerged. Terrence had attended events involving 2 victims months before their deaths. His profession routinely placed him in environments where information flowed freely. He spent enormous amounts of time reviewing community forums, neighborhood discussions, and social media platforms. In other words, Terrence occupied exactly the type of environment where somebody could learn a great deal about strangers without attracting attention. The connection was circumstantial, but it existed. That meant Terrence remained a suspect as well. Then a 4th name surfaced. His name was Nathan Cross. Nathan worked in information technology and had previously volunteered as a moderator for several online community groups. During a review of digital communications, investigators discovered his presence within several online spaces frequented by the victims. The connection wasn't strong, but neither had many of the previous connections. At that stage, investigators were unwilling to ignore anyone. Nathan joined the suspect pool. Suddenly we had 4 possible offenders: Garrett Sloan, Terrence Walker, Eric Friend, Nathan Cross. Each possessed pieces of the puzzle. Each possessed access to information. Each possessed characteristics that concerned investigators. None possessed enough evidence to justify an arrest. The investigation entered a difficult phase. We stopped searching for suspects. We started testing them. Detectives interviewed Garrett again, then a 3rd time. The same process occurred with Terrence, and Eric, and Nathan. Every interview generated information. Every interview generated contradictions. Every interview generated additional questions. Yet none generated certainty. That was the frustrating reality. Each suspect explained some aspects of the case. None explained all of it.
Detective, with 4 viable suspects, growing forensic evidence, and increasing pressure to prevent another murder, did investigators begin focusing on any particular piece of evidence capable of separating the innocent from the guilty?
Yes. The answer increasingly appeared forensic. Witness memories can change. Suspects can lie. People can misremember. Forensic evidence doesn't care about narratives. It only reflects reality. Laboratory personnel continued reviewing trace evidence recovered from all 3 investigations. Analysts compared microscopic materials, environmental contaminants, digital timelines, and physical evidence recovered from the scenes. Individually, many of the findings seemed insignificant. Collectively, they began forming a pattern. The challenge was connecting that pattern to a person. That connection remained just beyond our reach, but we could feel it getting closer. Every laboratory report seemed to narrow the possibilities. Every interview seemed to eliminate another explanation. Every week made it harder for the offender to remain invisible. The problem was that he didn't know we were getting closer. And because he didn't know, he remained dangerous. That concern intensified when investigators identified what appeared to be pre-incident surveillance activity involving another potential target. For the first time since Ronald Mercer's murder, I genuinely believe we might be running out of time. The offender appeared confident, comfortable, perhaps even emboldened. And offenders who become comfortable often make mistakes. We just needed one. One fingerprint, one piece of DNA, one trace of physical evidence connecting our suspect to the murders. One undeniable link. The laboratory continued working. The interrogations continued. The surveillance continued. Everything was moving toward a conclusion. We simply didn't know which suspect would be standing at the center of it.
Detective, if Garrett Sloan, Terrence Walker, Eric Friend, and Nathan Cross all remained viable suspects, and investigators believed another victim might already be under observation, what was the forensic discovery that finally gave detectives a path toward identifying the killer?
The answer arrived in a laboratory report that initially looked routine. But buried inside that report was a connection none of us expected. A connection that would force us to re-examine every suspect, every interview, and every assumption we had made. And once we understood what that evidence meant, we knew the investigation was about to change forever.